Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Modern Engineers. Today we're going to complete an UNREP on Erebus. Hello again, everyone. This is Future Me. Ooh. I might have realized that not a lot of people might know what an UNREP is or what we're going to be doing, and I was looking back at this footage and realized that I was not talking a lot because I was stressed out. So let me just kind of crash course explain what it means to do an UNREP, or what even an UNREP is.
Sea power is a basic ingredient of national strength. And mobility is a basic ingredient of sea power. Mobility means being able to go wherever needed on short notice. It also means being able to remain underway for extended periods without being dependent on fixed bases. All this is possible, of course, because the needed supplies can be delivered underway. Replenishment at sea gives the Navy maximum flexibility.
For the Navy, the process is pretty simple. You have the ship that is giving the fuel, and you have the ship that is receiving the fuel. The first ship is always kind of the mothership, if that makes sense. It's usually called the sender. This ship is usually called the receiver. When they first rendezvous, they are going to get into what's called a Romeo position, or a Romeo Corpin. It's basically a rendezvous course that both ships have agreed upon, and they're going to be moving at the same speed, about 12 knots. In Space Engineer's case, we're going to use 12 meters a second because it's just easier to say knots and meters a second, stuff like that. Now, Ship 2 is going to be in what's known as pre-contact, or Romeo at the dip position. This is basically when everything's kind of set up, they're ready for the UNREP, they're ready to receive fuel, but they're not approaching because they don't want to risk damaging the ships yet. And it's usually back here, pretty far aft, just kind of waiting. And in the Navy, at the dip is so Romeo is the flag for conducting the UNREP, so that's why there's a lot of Romeo terms. At the dip means preposition or prepare. So when the flag is at the dip, it means that the ship is ready or prepared and ready to start whatever they're about to execute. So when they say Romeo, the ship means that it's conducting the UNREP. So once both ships are ready to go, that's when they start moving to get into each other. So the first ship is going to hold and maintain position. She's not going to defer from course. She's just going to go in a straight line, not stopping. The second ship is going to actually begin the approach, because in the rules of the road for the Coast Guard and stuff like that, you want to give way to the ship that has the least amount of maneuverability. So obviously the ship that has the most amount of maneuverability is going to be doing the approach. So she's going to come to what's called the pre-contact position, which is as close as they can to the receiving station on the larger vessel. Now, on the Battleship here is actually in the same position as it is on the Iowa class. So in Thunder's case, it's right about here. And the receiving station for the fuel is actually midships on the Terra class. So they're going to want to move until both ships are pretty much lined up as close as they can to the positions. Next, in the Navy, they shoot what's called shot lines over to the other ship. Once they're pretty close to where they're supposed to be, this first line is what's called the P&D line, or the phone and distance line. This allows the ship's bridge to communicate through sound power net to the other ship's bridge in case something were to go wrong. Also, it is a rope with little flags on it that have different colors that tell you the distance of the ships apart and the angle, so in case the ships start to drift apart. Simultaneously, at the fuel rig, the messenger line is being sent across. This is just the rope that pulls the span wire, or a large threaded cable, that the traveler travels across in a zipline fashion when it's all tensioned up. It's called the messenger because attached to the rope is a bag that the rig captains use to talk to each other from across the way. But before the traveler and the probe can come across, the span wire must be attached to a pelican hook. This is a quick trip device that allows the ships to be able to disconnect in the case of an emergency. It's actually strong enough to also hold back the tension between the two ships. Once tensioned, the span wire acts as a zip line that allows the entire rig to come sliding right across and into the assembly. Contrary to belief, the entire method is done by hand, save for the tensioning pulley. This method is also repeated with the UNREPS station. Only with supplies it's a little bit different. You need what's called a high line. This kind of keeps it tightened enough that you can use a zip line that's able to carry at least a couple tons of packages and materials across the way. Sometimes even weapons. Once the unwrap is completed, all the fuel, all that stuff is transferred over. The entire method is then thrown into reverse. You start lowering things, you start detensioning, you then trip the pelican hook and disconnect the entire rig, pull away, and then the last thing is to literally break away. Now the sending ship is going to stay on course, on speed. The other ship is going to start speeding up and pulling away. You don't want them to ever come across the same course, and it isn't until both ships are well and far enough away do they actually start trying to either reform up or go back to their normal duties. Now that you kind of understand the basics of how the UNREP is conducted, let's talk about how or why I would achieve it in Space Engineers. First, let's talk why. 1. Agaris is huge. Just getting to these patrol boxes is about 26 kilometers, and I consume a lot of fuel just to get to this area. Fuel being time on station, range, all that stuff. You kind of want to be able to extend that range or fuel time or all of that just to remain on station and remain potent. Now, I have not been threatened by the GC, but I have a funny feeling that with a very high threat score, once it works, that I'm not going to be able to let off the gas pedal once the war starts. So being able to refuel these ships at sea is going to only make it safer. The process itself isn't safe, but keeping the ships away from the GC is. Ships in port are vulnerable. Ships at sea are safer. On top of that, looking at the map, the GC is quite a long way away. In fact, if I was to guess, it's probably over 150 plus kilometers between any friendly stations and stuff like that. This means that I'm going to have to be able to do UNREPS in order to resupply the ships for them to do sustained operations against the GC. But for weapons, fuel, ammunition, all that stuff, it's all going to have to be resupplied at sea, which means I'm going to have to be able to do it. Now that the why is out of the way, let's talk the how. So I'm going to intervene right as things started kind of going wrong. Now, in Space Engineers, we don't have ropes, we don't have span wires, we don't have cables, any of that stuff. What we do have is pistons, rotors, and hinges, also known as the three parts of clank. Now, before I can explain what atrocity is happening behind me, I kind of have to explain the boom.
Sometimes my genius is... it's almost frightening.
Behold my genius! Now, I know what you're thinking. What the clang is that? It is easily the hardest solution I could have ever come up with to solve this problem. For those of you not in the loop who don't really know and don't really play Space Engineers, let me just clue you in. You are taught, when you first start out with Space Engineers, to not really use pistons and rotors together, especially not to combine them with a connector that then connects to another ship, or to have the whole thing moving. What I have done here is quite literally madness. It is comprised of 2 large pistons, 4 hinges, and 1 advanced rotor that is below deck. There is also an event controller and a custom turret controller that controls the whole rig. As you saw in the video, it is pretty simplistic in its effective use. The first step that happens is the lowermost hinge rolls back before the use of the rig, allowing the connector to move free and clear once the other 2 hinges fold out and the lower hinge then folds back forward, allowing the whole rig to kind of stretch out. From there, the pistons extend to their maximum reach, allowing as much clearance as we can between both vessels. Most of the hard work is then done by the receiving ship, which does all the work like lineup, pre-contact, readying itself, and then once the rig is deployed, final lineup, and just kind of fine-tuning itself into the right position. It is then up to the operator to lower the boom, the last little bit, into the lineup position. And then it's up to the receiving ship again to do the final approach and contact. Now this is kind of where things started to go wrong. Now, here's some context. The main issue I have with this rig is that the one that you see in this picture is not the rig that is currently in use. You see, the one in this picture was destroyed when an 18-inch shell slammed into this part of the deck and caused some damage. Luckily, the ship survived the attack, but did not save the rig. Now, there's some other reasons why I think that happened. I think it was because it was a cockpit and the turret just targeted it and just kind of went for it. The reason this is some important context is because once the ships actually made contact, the rig is supposed to go slack. Basically, the hinges lose all their braking force, and the pistons are supposed to kind of lose most of their braking force, turning the rig from a stiff, hard line into a small, lowering, kind of rope-esque. This is supposed to allow the forces between both vessels to kind of just dampen into a rig without actually causing any damage between both vessels. As you can see, this did not happen. Turns out that I had forgotten to program this function into the event controller, which then caused both ships to start enacting forces against each other and causing them to start to tip. Stabilization scripts did not help, resetting them did not help, and if anything, the situation got worse. So the only way to control it was to go over to the sending ship, or Thunder, and take manual control of the ship's gyros and straighten her up. This worked for a moment until Erebus started to have those same forces enacted on her, causing her to lose stability. However, it doesn't take very long to refuel systems in Space Engineers, especially when you have a surplus of fuel on board. It actually transfers over pretty quickly. This is when I had the brilliant idea to simply just get on with it and conduct the breakaway, since both ships were now fully fueled and it was time to go home. Unbeknownst to me, this would be when problem number 2 showed up. Emergency breakaway, emergency breakaway. Let's get out of here. Come on, full power. Let's turn away from the ship before something else happens. Oh no. Fuck! Damn it! Why did I do that? I'm so fucking stupid! Yeah, I'm an idiot. So, turns out that I forgot one key feature of this entire system that I did not do. In the bowels of the ship, there is a timer block marked breakaway. This is supposed to be the trigger that you actually use to break away. What it does is simple, is it reverses one of the hinges by 3 meters a second, allowing it to go into the high and raised position that you saw earlier, and starts retracting the pistons, allowing the ship to have more room and space so that they don't have what's called snapback. Another thing that happened was that the stabilization script started working again once I disconnected. So there seems to be something wrong once the ships connect, so we're going to figure that out later. Anyway, when the ship started to correct its roll, it snapped the entire rig back into the deck of the ship and slammed it, destroying the UNREP rig and puncturing a hole in the ship's hull. Now, the damage is kind of minor. It was just a simple missing panel, and of course, the entire rig was destroyed. Luckily, nobody was hurt, obviously, and the ships both were able to walk away from the scenario. Now, keep in mind, this is the second time I've conducted this UNREP, although the first time recording it. All in all, the main objective was achieved. So, both ships were refueled, both ships were somewhat refueled safely, and the process was proven to still work, albeit with some major bugs that caused some damage to the ships and the rigs and a few other things that need to be worked out. Anyway, with that idiocy aside, back to old me. God, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? I never hit P. Never hit P. Looks like the damage is not so bad. I mean, one connector on this end, and it looks like the camera's gone. Obviously, there's some programming bugs and issues, so I'm going to have to fix that when we're in port, but I guess all in all, it could have been a lot worse. So that is basically going to wrap up Operation Group Sale. Now, no operation is complete without an AAR, or an after-action report, and lessons learned. So, what did we learn? First, we learned that DDG-31, or Ares, is not capable of using FleetLink, because she's missing the AI modules, so we're going to have to install that on the next time she's in port. We also learned that Terra is rather terrible when it comes to seakeeping for some reason. She's just unable to really do anything when it comes to AI, because she's just so unable to actually complete objectives. Next, radio comms. Didn't exist. I didn't show it because I couldn't get it to work. Along with that, the data side of FleetLink didn't work either. I wasn't able to share telemetry with any of the ships or orders, executions. All of it was pretty manual and labor intensive. So that's going to have to get flushed and streamlined and troubleshot. Speaking of FleetLink, the entire formation system itself was intermittent. It didn't work sometimes, it worked most of the times, and it led to a few collisions. And it was very micromanagey. It was very micromanagey. I had to cut a lot of footage just micromanaging the entire system. So we're going to have to streamline it, do some more testing, figure that out. More issues with FleetLink. I couldn't actually change the formations without direct remote control into the vessel, which is impossible if the vessels are moving. So that's going to have to get adjusted and fixed. And this issue led to more issues with dead in the water, ships stopping, causing issues, and just basically going stop, and the AI module had to be reset. So we're going to figure that out too. Both Terror and Erebus had remote control and pathfinding issues, so that didn't work. We're going to have to figure that one out. So one of the systems that you didn't get to see, TACAN, which was part of the radio side, didn't provide any navigational aids to the aircraft at all. So it was very difficult to actually see anything. On that same sentence with the aircraft and the drone, we were unable to do any night ops, so we're going to have to do some night ops with that. We also really did not get any navigational aids on landing, so the SGSI or glide slope indicator didn't work, so that's going to have to get fixed too. Erebus was unable to enter eco mode, which made her burn more fuel than she was supposed to, requiring the unrep in the first place. The battleship's guns were wildly inconsistent between shots. I need to do an AI test of the guns to make sure they're actually accurate, otherwise I'm basically just shooting blanks. This one's interesting. I wrote down that we were unable to actually signal a low fuel or monitor fuel without direct linking to a ship. So we might want to look into maybe a new system to supplement or fix that. Some of the ideas I was tossing around in my head was possibly a system that uses broadcast controllers and some event controllers, and sending a message to the rest of the fleet, their fuel state, depending on that actual fuel state. I haven't finished the design of that system, but it might get installed in the radio room, and we'll see how that goes. Part of that is also part of the telemetry thing. I feel like that I should be able to just look at my display from the lead vessel and be able to see the fuel state of the other ships without having to radio them or have them constantly radioing each other their fuel states. Especially since broadcast controllers can be monitored, I'd rather not have the fleet broadcasting their messages to each other and us that they're low on fuel. Unless it's an emergency. I'd rather them message me when they're at below 25 or below 50. Like those thresholds, I'd rather know. And lastly, this wasn't on the docket, but the missile systems weren't tested, and neither were some of the radars. So I kind of want to do a live fire in the near future with the destroyer, maybe, and try and fix some of the issues and maybe get an actual missile fire off of her and do some more testing, get the actual missile systems ready to go, because we're going to be fighting the GC hopefully soon. Aside from that, a lot of lessons learned. Micromanaging all these ships was a pain in the butt. So, we're going to have to make it streamlined, especially since I'm the only one here. And if we don't streamline it now, this is only going to be a problem that gets worse, because the more ships I have, the worse the micromanaging is going to be. So, the more streamlined it is, the more simpler and easier it's going to be able to maintain op tempo. Lastly, the UNREP. The UNREP resulted in damage to both vessels. Both UNREP stations were not automated, and there was a lot of bugs and fixes that need to be done. So we need to do more UNREP practices. So the next time we do a operation, probably another live fire in the future, we're going to do some more reps and sets for the UNREP, because obviously I still have a lot of learning to do and I have a lot of automationing to do. Aside from that, I think it went rather well, considering the options. Yeah, Erebus ended up being the punching bag of the entire operation and has been more damaged than she actually was when she came in, but we did do almost all of our goals. So, all in all, a pretty successful operation, especially after having not done one in such a long time. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I will catch you all in the next one, and I'll hopefully see you all soon. So, quick, a little PSA before we wrap up for today. First, if you'd like some sneak peeks and stuff like that, or to get a hold of me to see what I'm doing, definitely check out the Discord link below. Secondly, I have redone the Patreon, so if you guys want to support, you can. If not, don't worry about it. I have a few things that are coming up in the future that'll hopefully be better rewards, but right now it's not so much. Aside from early access to videos and access to unfinished projects at the moment. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really do. I really appreciate you guys watching it and all that stuff. So hopefully we'll see you guys in the future. You guys have a good one.